Africans call the buffalo Black Widow. Colonial hunters nicknamed it Black Death. An estimated 200 people die every year attacked by this animal. Envisioned more than by lions or leopards. But on the arid plains, a group of fewer than 1,300 people faces this giant as food.
No firearms, no vehicles, no modern equipment.
Only knowledge passed down for generations.
Vulvenrin line-strained hetaine, and a poison extracted from a pink flower
that grows on the islands of Lake Eyasi.
The Hadzabe are not an anthropological curiosity or a tourist attraction created to entertain Western visitors. They are living proof that the human being can exist in another way. As you read these words, somewhere in the hills around the Rift Valley, a group of men is preparing to face one of the most dangerous animals on the planet, using technology that has not changed in 50,000 years. Genetically, the Hadzabe are one of the oldest human lineages on the planet, comparable only to the San peoples of southern Africa. Their DNA carries markers that connect them directly to the first modern humans who inhabited the African continent. The Hadzabe territory lies in northern Tanzania, in a region known as Hadzaland. Lake Eyasi, a seasonal salt lake covering approximately 1,050 square kilometers, forms the heart of this territory. This lake is 65 million years old, formed shortly after the extinction of the dinosaurs, when a fissure opened in the floor of the Rift Valley. The surrounding landscape is a mixture of dry savannas, thorny acacia forests, and the iconic baobab trees, whose massive trunks can store thousands of liters of water. Think of the scenario for a moment. The African buffalo, specifically the subspecies known as the Cape buffalo, can weigh between 500 and 900 kilograms. To give you an idea, an adult male at the upper limit of this range equals the weight of an economy car fully loaded with passengers and luggage. Adult males measure between 1 meter and 30 centimeters and 1 meter and 70 in height at the shoulder, practically the same stature as an average man. The body length can vary from 2 meters and 40 to 3 meters and 40 centimeters. Their horns form a continuous bone structure. On top of the head called a boss, a natural shield that can withstand violent impacts. The distance between the tips of the horns can exceed 1 meter and 64 centimeters in the largest specimens ever recorded. And the speed. An enraged buffalo can reach 56 kilometers per hour in a few seconds. Usain Bolt, the fastest man in history, reached 44 kilometers per hour in his world record for the 100-meter dash. If you cross the path of an angry buffalo, there is no run that saves you. Even lions, the most feared predators of the African savanna, rarely attack adult buffaloes. When they do, they need a group of 3 or more felines working in coordination, and even then they frequently fail. The African buffalo is responsible for more lion deaths than any other animal. The buffalo is part of the so-called African Big Five, the 5 most dangerous animals to hunt on the continent: lion, leopard, rhinoceros, elephant, and buffalo. Modern safari hunters pay more than $10,000 for the privilege of trying to take down a buffalo using large-caliber rifles and experienced guides. Even so, fatal accidents happen regularly. The animal has a well-documented reputation for ambushing hunters who pursue it, hiding in dense vegetation and attacking when the human prey least expects it. Now consider the weapon the Hadzabe use against this colossus, a bow made of local wood, approximately 1 meter and 20 in length, and arrows with tips of forged metal or sharpened bone. The penetration force of these arrows is sufficient to wound, but never to instantly bring down an animal of almost a ton. So how do they manage? The answer lies in a harmless-looking plant that blooms on the shores of Lake Eyasi. The desert rose, known scientifically as Adenium obesum, is a succulent with a bulbous trunk and vibrant pink flowers. The Hadzabe call it panjuko, and it represents their most utilized poison. To those who do not know, it looks like just another African ornamental plant. But every part of this plant contains cardiac glycosides, chemical compounds that directly affect the functioning of the heart. When these substances enter an animal's bloodstream, the first signs appear quickly: excessive salivation, vomiting, diarrhea. As the poisoning progresses, the animal becomes weak, lethargic, unstable on its legs. The heart begins to fail. It works. The Hadzabe utilize 3 different types of poison for their arrows, depending on availability. Besides the panjuko extracted from the desert rose, there is shanjoko, obtained from the seeds of the Strophanthus eminei vine, a shrub or creeper that grows in the mountainous areas of Hadzabe territory. The third type, called kalikasi, is produced from the Acocanthera shimperi tree, but this plant does not grow in Hadzaland. The Hadzabe obtain this poison through commercial exchanges with neighboring tribes. All 3 poisons work by the same principle: cardiac glycosides that paralyze the heart muscle. The process of preparing the panjuko poison is meticulous and requires specialized knowledge. The men travel to a specific island on the southeast shore of Lake Ayasi, where the desert roses grow in abundance. They cut branches or crush the plant while still attached to the ground, using the wooden end of their axes as a pestle. Once the pulp is well beaten, the juice is squeezed out and placed in improvised containers. The liquid is then boiled slowly until all the water evaporates. What remains is a black and sticky substance that can be molded like clay and transported in small balls. At the moment of application, the hunter softens the poison and rolls it into thin strips just below the arrowhead. The poison is highly soluble in water, so the Hadzabe developed special quivers that keep the poisoned arrows away from the damp ground. The poison needs to be handled with extreme care. An accidental scratch can be fatal to the hunter himself. The Hadzabe transport their poisoned arrows wrapped in leaves and never touch the treated tips with unprotected hands. This knowledge about the danger of the poison is transmitted from childhood when boys begin to accompany adult men on small training hunts. But the poison alone guarantees nothing. The arrow needs to hit the animal. And here enters the true art of Hadzabe hunting. How do you track an animal that can kill you in seconds if it perceives your presence? The answer lies in decades of observation, transmitted from father to son, from grandfather to grandson. The Hadzabe know the movement patterns of the buffaloes, know where they drink water during the dry season, where they rest during the scorching heat of the African midday, along which trails they walk at dusk when the temperature drops. They identify tracks on the ground that to untrained eyes would be completely invisible. A footprint partially covered by dry leaves tells a complete story: how long ago the animal passed, in what direction it was going, if it was alone or in a group, if it walked calmly or hurriedly, if it was male or female, young or old. The Hadzabe perform 2 types of hunts. Short hunts happen in the morning, generally within a radius of 5 kilometers from the camp, and focus on smaller prey like dik-diks, wild pigs, baboons, and birds like guinea fowl and francolins. But the buffalo hunt belongs to the second category, the long expeditions. The Thi-Ji. Men may walk for 3 to 4 consecutive days in search of large animals. They sleep in the bush, eat what they find along the way, keep themselves in almost absolute silence. They carry only their bows, arrows, axes, and small balls of poison wrapped in leaves. When they finally spot a suitable buffalo, usually an older solitary male that is separated from the herd, the approach begins. Old buffaloes that have left the herd are known to be particularly aggressive and dangerous, but they are also more vulnerable for being alone. Total silence, every step is calculated with millimetric precision. The wind needs to be blowing from the animal to the hunter, never the opposite, or the buffalo will smell the human scent and flee, or worse, attack. The Hadzabe move using the vegetation as cover, sometimes crawling for hundreds of meters through thorny bushes that scratch the skin. The ideal distance for the shot is about 20 to 30 meters. Further away, the arrow loses precision and force. Closer, the risk of being detected increases exponentially. The moment of the shot is a fraction of a second that can mean the difference between feeding the camp for weeks or returning empty-handed, or not returning. When the arrow hits the buffalo, the animal usually does not fall immediately. It runs. The impact of a wood and metal arrow is not enough to bring down 900 kilograms of muscle and fury. The Hadzabe do not chase. They wait. The desert rose poison needs time to act, sometimes hours, depending on where the arrow hit and how much toxin entered the bloodstream. The hunters follow the tracks of the wounded animal, always maintaining a safe distance of at least 100 meters, observing the signs that the poison is taking effect. The animal stumbles, stops to rest with increasing frequency. Its breath becomes visible even from a distance. A staggering buffalo is even more dangerous than a healthy one. It knows something is wrong. It is scared, confused, aggressive. Any sudden movement can trigger a desperate charge. The Hadzabi tell stories of hunters who approached too soon and paid with their lives. Patience is not just a virtue in this context, it is survival. When the animal finally succumbs, the real work begins. An adult buffalo can provide between 300 and 400 kilograms of usable meat, besides fat, viscera, skin, bones, and tendons. The Hadzabe possess no refrigeration, so they need to process the animal quickly before the meat spoils in the African heat. Parts are consumed immediately, right at the hunting site. Others are cut into thin strips and smoked over improvised fires for preservation. The drying and smoking process can take several days. And here arises a fundamental question. How does a group of people carry hundreds of kilograms of meat for kilometers of rugged terrain without vehicles or pack animals? They do not carry, they move. When the Hadzabe slaughter a large animal like a buffalo or giraffe, the entire community moves close to the carcass. Instead of transporting the prey, they transport the camp. This brilliant adaptation eliminates the logistical problem and allows them to utilize every part of the animal without waste. It is an elegant solution that was likely developed thousands of years ago and transmitted through countless generations. Hadzabi camps are deliberately simple structures. Huts made of curved branches covered with dry grass can be assembled in just 2 or 3 hours by experienced women. There is no attachment to a specific location. Mobility is an essential part of their survival. Strategy, a heritage from our nomadic ancestors who roamed Africa before the emergence of agriculture. A typical group includes about 30 people and moves every few weeks, following the availability of drinking water, wild fruits, and game. The sun is low when the hunters return to the place where the buffalo finally fell. The animal lies motionless among acacia bushes, its massive body creating a shadow that extends for several meters. The men approach with extreme caution, even now. A buffalo can seem dead and still have residual strength for one last fatal attack. They poke the animal with the ends of their longbows, watch attentively for any movement in the eyes or nostrils, any muscle tremor that indicates life. Nothing. The processing work begins immediately. The Hadzabi do not possess stainless steel knives or industrial cutting tools. Their blades are made of recycled metal, frequently obtained through commercial exchanges with the neighboring Datoga tribe, who are skilled blacksmiths. The Datoga live in the Yaeda Valley, southeast of Lake Eyasi, and have maintained a symbiotic relationship with the Hadzabi for generations. In exchange for arrowheads and metal blades, the Hadzabi offer game meat and wild honey. For the Datoga, eating game meat is traditionally taboo, but the blacksmiths who occupy a marginalized social position within the Datoga community do not follow this restriction. It is a trade system that has worked for centuries, based on mutual trust and complementary need. The first cut opens the buffalo's abdomen from top to bottom. The smell is intense, primordial, a mixture of fresh blood, intestinal content, and the characteristic musk of the wild animal. For the Hadzabe, it is not unpleasant. It is the smell of abundance, of food security guaranteed for weeks. The viscera are removed with methodical care. The stomach, the intestines, the liver, the kidneys, the heart, everything has specific utility. Nothing is wasted. Even the stomach content, partially digested, will be examined to identify which plants the buffalo was eating, useful information for future gathering. And here enters an element that may shock modern sensibilities. Some parts are consumed raw, right there, still warm from the animal's body heat. The liver, extraordinarily rich in vitamin A, iron, and other essential nutrients, is frequently eaten immediately by the hunters. Zebra stomach was considered a special delicacy in the past, although zebra hunting has become rare in modern times. Not for lack of ability to cook, but for tradition and absolute practicality. After days of grueling pursuit, the body needs quick energy. Raw meat provides protein and fat for immediate absorption, without the waiting time that cooking would require. The Hadzabe are not primitives who are unaware of fire. On the contrary, they master one of the oldest fire production techniques known to humanity, wood friction. Two pieces of specific wood are rubbed against each other in rapid and continuous movements until the friction generates enough heat to ignite a handful of dry grass placed strategically. The process takes less than a minute for an experienced Hadzabe. Western visitors who try to replicate the technique frequently give up after several minutes of frustrated attempts, with the palms of their hands in blisters and no smoke in sight. The fire is lit near the buffalo carcass. Not one small bonfire, but several, distributed strategically at different points. Some will serve to roast meat that will be consumed that same night. Others, smaller and purposely smokier, will be used to smoke strips of meat that need to be preserved for the following days and weeks. Observe what happens when the meat meets. The flames. There is no metal grill, there is no cast iron pan. The Hadzabi skewer pieces of meat on sharpened sticks and position them over the fire, rotating occasionally to ensure even cooking on all sides. It is the most elementary form of cooking that exists, and also one of the oldest known to humanity. Our ancestors cooked exactly like this, hundreds of thousands of years ago, long before the emergence of any kitchen utensil. The smell of roasting meat spreads through the savanna air and attracts the entire camp. The women arrive carrying small children tied to their backs. The older ones approach at their own pace, some supported by improvised staffs. There is no formal call for the meal. There is no set time. There is no set table. The food is ready when it is ready, and everyone eats when they arrive. The distribution follows a pattern that seems chaotic and random to external observers, but possesses precise internal logic developed over millennia. The hunters who participated directly in the hunt have the right to certain specific portions, generally the most valued parts like the liver and the fat. But this does not mean they eat first or eat more. It means only that they decide how to distribute these portions among the other members of the group. It is a system of prestige that manifests itself through demonstrated generosity, not selfish accumulation. A small child, perhaps 3 or 4 years of age, is sitting near the crackling fire. One of the hunters, possibly his father or uncle, offers a piece of meat directly from his own portion. The child accepts without elaborate ceremony, chews the fibrous meat with difficulty using his milk teeth swallows. It is a scene that repeats in every corner of the camp, at every lit fire. The older ones feeding the younger ones, the stronger ones ensuring that the weaker ones do not go in want. How long will this meat last? An adult buffalo can feed a camp of 30 people for 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how it is preserved and supplemented with other foods gathered daily. Smoked meat can last even longer, especially during the dry season that runs from June to October, when the air humidity is low and bacterial decomposition is significantly slower. The smoking technique is simple but extraordinarily effective. Thin strips of meat, cut with precision to ensure uniform drying, are hung over low-intensity fires where smoke envelops them constantly for days. The process gradually removes moisture from the meat, while chemical compounds present in the smoke act as natural preservatives and antimicrobials. After several days of this continuous treatment, the meat acquires a rigid texture, almost like leather, and an intense, smoky flavor, able to be stored and transported for weeks without any form of artificial refrigeration. But meat is not the only product of the buffalo that the Hadzabi utilize systematically. The thick skin of the animal will be tanned using traditional methods involving natural oils and transformed into resistant leather for clothing and accessories. The longer bones will be broken to extract the marrow, an extraordinarily rich source of caloric fat that the Hadzabi value enormously. Some bones will be transformed into practical tools. The tendons will be carefully extracted, dried in the sun, and used as durable strings for hunting bows. Even the massive horns have utility, whether as containers for storage or as valuable objects of exchange with other tribes in the region. This complete and integral utilization of the animal is not just practical efficiency, it is a form of deep respect. The Hadzabe do not hunt for sport, for fun or for a trophy to display. Each dead animal represents vital sustenance for the entire community. To waste any part would be not only impractical from a logistical point of view, but morally wrong within their ancestral worldview. And what is this worldview? The Hadzabe do not follow any organized religion in the sense that modern societies understand. They possess no built temples, ordained priests, or written sacred books. But this does not mean they are devoid of spirituality or connection with greater forces. When questioned about their deepest beliefs, they respond consistently that they exist because of the land where they live, and that they will always take care of this land in return. It is a philosophy of balanced reciprocity with the natural environment, not of dominion or exploitation over it. This symbiotic relationship with nature is visible in every aspect of their daily lives. The Hadzabe do not exhaust the resources of an area before moving to the next. They do not hunt more animals than they can consume. They do not gather more fruits or tubers than they need for the next few days. Their environmental impact on the ecosystem is practically zero, which explains why they manage to live in the same geographic region for 50 consecutive millennia without degrading or destroying it. The contrast with modern industrialized society could not be more stark and disturbing. While world leaders discuss sustainability in luxurious international conferences and governments create ambitious environmental goals that they rarely manage to fulfill, the Hadzabe simply live sustainably every day. Not because they read alarming scientific articles about climate change or global warming, but because any other way of living would have meant their complete extinction a long time ago. Night falls heavily over the temporary camp. The fire still burns, now lower and milder, casting dancing and ghostly shadows over the faces of the Hadzabe gathered in informal circles. Some people already sleep deeply, satiated by the abundant meal and exhausted by the day's work. Others converse in a low, almost whispered voice, using their unique and fascinating language filled with click sounds that possesses no known kinship with any other living language in the world. The Hadzain language is considered by linguists a linguistic isolate, a sonic relic of times so unimaginably ancient that it left no other descendants or related languages. Specialized linguists believe it may represent one of the oldest forms of human communication still in active use on the planet. When you hear a Hadzabe speak their native language, with its characteristic clicks and unique rhythms, you are listening to direct echoes of how our most remote ancestors communicated thousands of generations ago. While the women gather, the children learn. Boys from 7 or 8 years old begin to accompany adult men on short hunts. They receive small bows proportional to their size and practice aim on fixed targets before trying to hit live prey. Girls learn to identify edible plants, to distinguish nutritious tubers from poisonous roots, to locate hives by the sound of bees. There is no formal school. There are no textbooks. Education happens through observation and direct practice, the oldest method of knowledge transmission humanity knows. When asked about the happiest day of their lives, the Hadzabe invariably answer the same way: the day they captured their biggest prey. There is no concept of retirement, of vacation, of the weekend. The distinction between work and leisure simply makes no sense in their language or in their culture. Hunting is not a job one does to earn money. It is the very essence of life. Gathering fruits is not a mandatory domestic task. It is a pleasurable social activity performed in a group with conversations and laughter. Fathom this: a society that functions without formal government, without written laws, without police, without prisons, without courts, and yet maintains order and social cohesion for more than 50 millennia. The Hadzabe solved problems of social organization that political philosophers and social scientists have debated heatedly for centuries without reaching consensus. The buffalo will feed the camp for weeks. The meat will be shared among all, without hierarchy, without privileges. A child will receive the same piece as the most experienced hunter. This is how the Hadzabe survived for 50,000 years, while empires crumbled around them. There are no chiefs among them. There is no accumulated property. There is no recorded famine in all their oral history. While the modern world faces crises of sustainability and inequality, there exists a people who solved these questions millennia ago. Their answer was simple: live with the land, not against it. But this ancestral existence is threatened like never before in history. In the last 50 years, the Hadzabe have lost a staggering 90% of their ancestral lands. Uncontrolled agricultural expansion, the creation of private game reserves for rich tourists, and the territorial advance of pastoral tribes like the Datoga and the Maasai have pushed this people into increasingly smaller and more marginal areas. Where they once hunted zebras, giraffes, and buffaloes freely in vast expanses of savanna, they now must content themselves with increasingly smaller prey like dik-diks, wild pigs, and warthogs in fragmented territories. In October of 2011, a community of 700 Hadzabe received official property. Titles over more than 20,000 hectares of land, the first time in history that the Tanzanian government formally recognized the territorial rights of an indigenous minority tribe. It was a historic and emotional victory, but clearly insufficient. Other Hadzabe communities scattered across the region still struggle for the same legal recognition, facing complex bureaucracies and powerful economic interests. Cultural tourism brought a new source of income for some Hadzabe groups in recent decades, but it also brought complex and unexpected challenges. Foreign visitors pay considerable amounts to accompany morning hunts, take exotic photographs, and buy traditional crafts like bows, arrows, and beaded necklaces. The money certainly helps to supplement basic needs, but constant exposure to external values, tourist expectations, and the temptation of the modern world creates subtle but real pressures on traditions that remained essentially intact for 50 millennia. When the last Hadzabe disappear, and that day may be closer than any of us would like to imagine, they take with them not only ancestral hunting techniques or secret poison recipes. They take the living and irrefutable proof that there exists another way to be human, a way that worked for longer than any civilization, empire, or nation that history has recorded. The next morning, the sun will rise over Lake Ayasi, as it has risen for 65 million years since the dinosaurs disappeared from the face of the earth, and this valley formed in the pulsating heart of Africa. The Hadzabe will wake up with the first rays of light, check the meat that is still smoking over the embers, decide collectively if it is a day to hunt again or to gather nutritious roots and wild honey nearby. Life continues as it has continued for 50,000 years. For now.